Well, good morning again. Let me begin by saying what a joy it is to be back with you after my summer hiatus. I got some much needed rest and spent time with family and friends. I'm also excited to share that our first grandchild is due in about 2 weeks. And I thank you, and I promise that baby pictures will follow. I asked Reverend Leah sort of half jokingly earlier this week, so is there a bylaw in the church that says that the minister can't put a picture of a grandchild on the screen on Sunday morning? Reverend Leah said, no, I don't believe there's such a bylaw, so just maybe go with grace and we'll see how it goes. As much as I needed the rest that you all afforded me, I want to say that I missed you. I missed your joy and your laughter, your passion and energy, your love and your kindness. This is a wonderful, wonderful congregation. And you most certainly are, to borrow Robbie Walsh's lovely phrase, good company. I also wanted to mention that yesterday I attended the Charlottesville Clergy Collective's event called Moving Beyond August the 12th. It was a very well done program, and what a joy it was to see a number of folks from our congregation both leading and participating. As memories of that terrible day were shared, I was reminded of conversations I've had with some of you about just how frightening and traumatizing it was. I am so sorry and saddened that our community experienced such hate and violence, but I'm also very proud that Charlottesville responded by removing those monuments to white supremacy, and that organizations like the Clergy Collective are bringing people together to build a Charlottesville that is more just, more equitable, more compassionate. There's a long, long way to go, and we have so much work to do. But people of goodwill are coming together, and I'm excited and proud that our congregation is most certainly part of that effort. The meditation that Angela just shared with us brought back many memories for me. As I think I've told you before, Robbie Walsh, the author of that meditation, was my very first Unitarian Universalist minister. And I feel so blessed to have experienced his extraordinary spiritual presence and wisdom. I wish you could have heard Robbie delivered or read a prayer and meditation when he was in the pulpit. He had one of the most spiritual voices I have ever encountered. I remember telling him several times that I loved his voice and presence so much that if his sermons only consisted of him reading the phone book, I wouldn't miss a Sunday. Robbie is the reason I'm a Unitarian Universalist and a UU minister, and will always carry his example and memory and presence in my heart. Now, Robbie's meditation is also memorable because I'm pretty sure, although I never asked him about this, I'm pretty sure that I've driven on that very expressway he talks about. This is the Southeast Expressway, for those of you who know the Boston area, coming up from the South Shore into downtown Boston. Now, most mornings, especially Monday through Friday, the traffic is bumper to bumper and moves at a snail's pace. But in those moments when there was an opening in the traffic, I almost always took that opportunity to zip into that fast lane so that I could shave a little time off of my commute. But as I imagined that happened to Robbie that day, traffic would invariably come to a sudden stop, and tires would squeal as people slammed on their brakes. I was usually lucky enough to avoid a mishap Although Carissa and I once on that very road had an unfortunate encounter with a cement mixer that luckily we were going like 5 miles an hour, that the mixer behind us was going 10, and got a little whiplash. We were mostly just shaken, but uninjured. Whether it's a traffic accident, a significant medical diagnosis, or perhaps a friend or loved one who is struggling, all of us experience moments of fear and, yes, hopelessness. Moments when we can feel so very alone. That's certainly what Robbie experienced as he sat in his car with a pain in his chest and tears in his eyes. But in those moments, I've been so blessed, as Robbie was that day, to have strangers and the beloveds in my life come to my aid. They've held my hand, wrapped their arms around me, offered their reassurance that I wasn't alone and that things would somehow be okay. I know there are many, far too many in our world who are alone and can't necessarily always count on the presence of good company. And I just want to say to anyone in this sanctuary or anyone joining us online, if you find yourself struggling and in need of a listening ear, please know that you have this community, the UU Congregation of Charlottesville, which loves and cares about you. We can only do so much. We're still working on how to prevent 6-car pileups. But I can tell you that we will and we can be your good company. And it is that loving spirit that leads us to offer pastoral care as one of our most important ministries in this congregation, and to have a wonderful pastoral care team. For those who may not be familiar with the term, pastoral care is about listening, compassion, empathy, and understanding. I am so grateful to Meg Dunham and Patty Wallens, who co-chair the pastoral care team, and to all the other team members who offer love and support to those in our congregation who need someone to listen. Again, I hope when you need that listening ear that you'll contact me or Reverend Leah, Meg or Patty or any member of the team. And every Sunday going forward, including today, a member of that team will be available after the service back in the pastoral care corner, as we're calling it, to offer support and to be that listening ear. Now, I know in our culture of individualism and self-reliance that reaching out can be hard. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to grin and bear it rather than asking for help. But one of the reasons Robbie was able to experience good company that day is that he allowed others to reach out to him, to care for him, to love him. Robbie didn't try to tough it out or pull himself up by his physical or emotional bootstraps. He experienced good company because he let his tears flow rather than maintaining a stiff upper lip, and because he allowed others to surround him with love and reassurance. This meditation Robbie's meditation that Angela shared reminds me of some very sage spiritual advice I received a few years ago. I was in the midst of a ministerial sabbatical, and one of the things I did was to go on a week-long retreat at a monastery. On the first day of this retreat, one of the monks gave those of us on the retreat, I guess you'd call it a spiritual pep talk. Now, among his many important insights, Father Carlos, that was his name, reminded us of how important it is to allow ourselves, and he had a wonderful phrase. He said, you must allow yourself sometimes to be a patient. Not to be patient, that's good too, but to be a patient. What I think Father Carlos was trying to tell us is that if we are to live our lives with joy and love, we must recognize that we need love and that we need the shelter of each other. I wrote that phrase in my journal that week, be a patient, and I have come back and looked at it over and over again to remind myself that there are times, many times, when I need to reach out and to not maintain that stiff upper lip. And you know, there's one more insight I'd like to say a word about from Robbie's meditation, which I think holds the key not only to dealing with the brokenness each of us experiences, but also that enables us to be that patient. Robbie says that the reason he often found himself feeling so afraid and uncertain, and that we all do, is that we forget. We forget about the presence of that spirit of love that lives and shines in caring people. We can get so caught up in all the stuff in our lives and all the negativity in the world that we simply lose sight of the fact that love is real, that kindness lives in every human heart, and that we always have and are always surrounded by a spirit that is good company. In the Islamic tradition, there is a wonderful theological concept called shirk. It's spelled like shirk, but it's pronounced shirk, which is often translated, I think, incorrectly in English as sin. But as I've come to learn, the literal translation of this term is not sin, but forgetfulness. So one might say, and I've seen several scholars who've written this, that in Christianity, the concept is original sin. In Islam, the concept is original forgetfulness. And what I think is going on here is that the Prophet Muhammad and all who followed understood that human beings have this inherent tendency to lose their way, to forget who they are, what matters most, what they're called to do and be. In Islam, shirk is often associated with losing sight of Allah, of God, of the divine, and substituting false gods, which in this case I don't think really mean like idols, which is a term I don't even like. I think the false gods that are being talked about here are things like power, greed, wealth, glory, and that old reliable self-importance and ego. Although we don't talk a whole lot in Unitarian Universalism about true or false gods, I really think Islam is onto something. Think for a moment about how easy it is to forget, to get our lives, or have our lives get off.
These pages are all the
What
remember we got the pages
living and receiving love,
well, these are
treating one another with kindness and compassion, and being blessed by good company. And I might add that the kind of forgetting Robbie and I think the Islamic tradition are talking about doesn't just happen to us as individuals. It can happen in our families, our neighborhoods, our workplaces, schools, political institutions, and most certainly in our religious communities. I mean, think for a moment about the toxic mix of religion, nationalism, and white supremacy that is growing stronger every day. Reverend Leah, I keep pointing to Reverend Leah, she teaches me so much. She recently drew my attention to a new book, an interview with an author, Russell Moore. I think Karen actually heard the interview, who used to be a very high official in the Southern Baptist Convention.
Anybody
More
need it?
writes in this book, he left the SBC, and more writes in this book
Thank you,
about the
Mom.
growth of Christian nationalism and recounts the growing number of Christian ministers who have told him that they are experiencing criticism and rejection from congregants for preaching about things like loving your neighbor or turning the other cheek. And when these same pastors respond to their congregants by saying that they're actually quoting Jesus directly, they are told that that kind of talk is too weak and not what people in their church believe. Now, it's easy for you ministers to stand up here and score points off of conservative Christianity, but it's not a problem. Forgetting is not a problem just among Christian evangelicals. We all forget and can go down paths that take us away from who we are and what matters most. We are no exception in this forgetting. And at the UU congregation of Charlottesville, this is precisely the reason we recently adopted a new mission, which reminds us that we are building community through love in action. So if there are moments when it feels like we as a congregation are falling a little bit off the path or forgetting who we are, go back to our mission. We are here to build community, both within and out in the world, through love in action. That mission is our North Star. It's our calling back to our best selves. So let me simply conclude by reaffirming what Robbie Walsh said so well. We need one another. We need good company. Each and every one of you is the light of love and care that encircles us every day and that wraps us in its arms when we are lost, scared, and in need of being reminded that we're not alone. So much of life is a mystery, but I believe with all my heart that we are put on this earth to love one another and to be good company. I know that may sound trite or simple, but I firmly believe that's ultimately who we are. And that when we are doing that, when we are being ourselves, our loving, caring, kind selves, those are the moments when we are happiest, most joyful, and most at peace. May we always remember to live with love at our center. May we always be those caring people, and may we always be grateful for the gift of good company. Amen. Blessed be, and thank you so much for listening and for being my good company.